I was born by the river in a little tent. And oh, just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gon' come. Oh, yes it is. So that's a favorite song of mine by the late great Sam Cooke. What Sam Cooke did was use words to convey a deeper meaning, a message. Like we've talked about in previous units, central idea. He wanted to convey that there was trouble in this country. This was written during the civil rights era in the 60s. He wanted to show through this selection of words and through music that there were serious problems of inequality that needed to be faced. So he used poetry and he used words to get across his ideas and his deeper feelings. And it's a great verse, it's a great song to look at to kick off our poetry unit. This will be our brand new unit. And basically what we're going to try to do is to understand how poets use poetic devices like metaphor, simile, imagery to convey or to show their meaning, to show the purposes of the poems that they've written. This, of course, is a song, but it has poetic language in it. I've been running just like a river. He uses a simile. He compares the motion of the river, something that never stops and is always moving, to his life, how he can never find any peace and how he's always moving. He uses a beautiful simile to convey that. And this is what you'll do in our new poetry unit. You'll pick and choose words. Poetry is all about slowing down and selecting words to convey or to show your meaning and your ideas and your feelings. So, for today's assignment, you want to think about your favorite song, and then you're going to select just some of the lyrics from that song, maybe a verse, 4 or 5 sentences from that song. This is called a stanza in poetry. For instance, the song I just sang is from a favorite song of mine called A Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke. Great song that he wrote after him and his wife were denied staying in a hotel and was consequently arrested for it. It's a wonderful song that talks about the problems of racial inequality during the civil rights movement. And you'll use SOAPSTONE to analyze the lyrics of your song. And this is something that you'll use throughout the entire unit to analyze poetry. Who's the speaker? What's the occasion? What is the audience? Who is this poem or song intended for? What's the purpose of the song or poem? And what or who is the subject of the song or the poem? What's the tone of this song or poem? Is it happy, joyful, apoplectic, surreal, elated? This is the method that you'll use whenever you're analyzing any piece of poetry or any song in this unit. Remember, there's poetry everywhere. If you're an athlete, you can use your words athletically. You might say something like, "The stiff, cold wind blew dead leaves around the court, but it wasn't enough to stop his moving motion. The ball, a leather-beating heart, rolled off his fingertips and into the basket like an omelet floating down into a pan." Maybe you're a musician. Maybe music is your passion. If that's the case, well then poetry is your friend. In this unit, we'll also be exploring how singers and songwriters, how composers of music use poetic language like figurative language, metaphor, simile, imagery. We're going to study these types of poetic devices and see how artists use them to create meaning. I might say something like, "My fingers pressed down against the steely strings I hadn't played in a while. They cause the tips of my fingers to go numb. As I strummed the strings, I could feel the music reverberate around the room. Of course, reading poetry is also a great place to find poetry. You can pick up any small poetry book, and you can really get into it. Oftentimes they're perfectly small. You can carry them around with you. We need a ceremony to celebrate our lasting love, to ignore the forecast of death, death tomorrow, death after a decade. For these long minutes, may my kisses restore our innocence. The only ceremony I know begins with our arms around each other. Poetry allows us to kind of slow down. It allows us to think about language, about words, and carefully select the words that we want to use. We live in a world where there's so much information swirling around, coming from the TV, the internet. Sometimes it's difficult to take in all this information. It can be extremely overwhelming. Poetry allows us to take a breath and to think about words, to think about what they mean, and how to pick the perfect words to say what we want. It's also important to keep in mind that poetry doesn't have to be super deep. You don't have to talk about love or death or the existence of being. You can talk about simple, everyday things. Oh, look, more bills to pay. I'd much rather do that later. As a matter of fact, I'd rather scrape off my skin with this cheese grater. You can use rhyme, and you can have fun with poetry too. Remember, it's all about choosing the words. Daddy, you know I love you. Let me count the ways. 1, you're lovely and you're kind, and kept me right in line, even when I was out of my mind. And 2, you knew just what to do, and always had my back, even when I was acting kinda whack. And 3, your soul is solid gold, honey, it was burning in the sky when the sun was just a young one. 4, you never shut my door, you knew that I was terrified of the dark in my room. Love you more than the universe cares, love you more than time has time to spare.